You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Got to let you all know real quick that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app now, or you can simply check out FanDuel.com to get $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, Hawks fans, got a beefy episode in store for you all here today as I got to dive into an eventful weekend for our Blackhawks. I'll break down what plagued them in a sloppy 3-1 loss to the Los Angeles Kings last night, in addition to a couple of injury updates that we got from practice here this morning. But one thing I've yet to discuss here on the show, I have written about it for Chicago Hockey Now. Quick plug, go and check out the website. You can also check out the Twitter account at Shy Hockey Now on X, I guess I should say, no longer known as Twitter. But of course, what I'm referring to is the Lukas Reichel trade. It finally happened, Blackhawks fans, after months and months of trade rumors. I mentioned last week, diving through the Blackhawks kind of forward conundrum that they were dealing with at the time, as Jason Dickinson and Andre Burakovsky were nearing their returns, which did end up transpiring last night against the Kings. Landon Slaggert is now back in the lineup after missing the opening 5-6 contests of the season. That wasn't going to make Lukas Reichel's life any easier in terms of getting a consistent opportunity in the lineup. And I mentioned, following the Blackhawks' 3-2 win over the Tampa Bay Lightning on Thursday during Friday's episode, that Reichel only played one shift in the third period, and that was a game in which he opened up the contest on the top line along with Connor Bedard and Tyler Bertuzzi. Didn't really fare all that well as a trio. That led to Reichel being stapled on the bench for most of that third period, and I said after that game, during my recap, that it could foreshadow Reichel once again being in limbo and having a healthy scratching coming his way in the near future. Well, it turns out he had a trade coming in his near future. Is on Friday afternoon, the Blackhawks dealt Reichel, the 17th overall pick in the 2020 NHL draft, to the Canucks in exchange for a 2027 fourth-round pick, which is actually the pick the Blackhawks sent to Vancouver when they acquired Ilya Mikheyev and took on his contract, which was deemed a poor one at the time. We all know how essential Mikheyev has been for the Blackhawks ever since joining the club, in addition to a second-round pick. That's all the Blackhawks sent to Vancouver in that trade, was a 2027 fourth. They now get it back here as part of this Lukas Reichel transaction, but definitely a disappointing and tough way to end Reichel's tenure here in Chicago. As you know, a player that showed a lot of promise early on in his career, point-per-game player in his first season in North America with the Rockford IceHogs, kind of pieced it together towards the end of the 2022-2023 campaign. I know a lot of Blackhawks fans remember that, when Reichel had 15 points, 7 goals, and 8 assists in 23 games, with most of that production coming in like a 15 to 16 game stretch toward the end of the season. But ever since, Reichel just has really struggled to piece it all together. And just with the wave of prospects that have finally arrived to the professional scene, and guys that were drafted by current general manager Kyle Davidson, of course, Reichel was not, with those guys just seemingly to be getting more opportunities ahead of Reichel and him kind of falling down in the pecking order. That left him in a real weird position these last couple of seasons. And we heard ahead of Reichel getting traded that he had requested to be dealt by the Blackhawks. Kyle Davidson grants him that wish by getting him moved to the Vancouver Canucks. But yeah, it definitely became clear that Reichel didn't have a future here in the Blackhawks organization. Last year in 70 games played, he only tallied 22 points, 8 goals, and 14 assists. And like I mentioned, didn't really get much of an opportunity. He averaged less than 12 minutes a game in those 70 contests, and mostly was positioned down inside the bottom six. Just never really figured out how to be a successful bottom sixer with that blazing speed that he possesses. And that's definitely Reichel's best attribute. That's the best quality of his game, is he can absolutely fly. But in terms of his vision, play recognition, and playmaking, he was never able to pair that up with his elite speed to become, a true top 6 caliber player. And I think the Blackhawks recognize that. They've obviously drafted forwards high in the NHL draft over these last few years. And, Roman Kancerov's come in. So is Anton Frondel, Sasha Boisvert, 3 players who are expected to join the Blackhawks organization for the 26-27 campaign. Then there's Oliver Moore, Nick Lardis, who off to phenomenal starts to their first pro seasons with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Again, it just became really clear that there wasn't going to be a spot in the Blackhawks organization for Reichel moving forward. And he definitely recognized that as well. And part of him requesting him trade, I'm sure he had that realization. So that's why the Blackhawks ultimately pulled the trigger on Friday afternoon, even though Reichel, he did have 4 points in the opening 5 games here this season, although, most of that production came in one game against the St. Louis Blues, the beatdown over the Blues, as we'll be calling it here for us Blackhawks fans. 3 of his 4 points on the season came in that game. He actually did tally a primary assist on the first of Ryan Donato's 2 goals on Thursday in Tampa Bay over the Lightning, but otherwise, outside of that, was pretty unnoticeable. And I don't know if that was necessarily like a final opportunity for Reichel to showcase his stuff to the Hawks organization or not, but definitely after an unsuccessful evening on that top line, it just, again, became clear that Reichel was going to be going back into limbo with numerous players set to return from their respected injuries and absences from the team. So even though a 4th round pick, Blackhawks getting their own draft selection in 2027 back for Reichel, that's definitely not an ideal return for a guy that was selected 17th overall back in 2020 and is still only 23 years old. Like I've talked about, has some incredible wheels that are evident on pretty much each and every shift that he plays. It's just he's not able to do anything with it and string together consistent impact performances in a row here. It's a sell low move by general manager Kyle Davidson, and just throughout all the trade rumors that Reichel has been going through over the last few months, I've talked on the show about how, while I don't think selling low for Reichel is a good idea business-wise, it's also so obvious that Kyle Davidson doesn't really see a spot for him in the future. And because of that, even though I feel like they gave him the first 5 games in the preseason here in the final year of his current deal with the Blackhawks to kind of show that, hey, maybe he is a different player. And we heard Blashill, I believe, say, it's a really important camp for Lukas coming in. He just didn't make the most of his opportunities and turn heads enough. And again, didn't put together consistent enough efforts consecutively to kind of go and change the narrative around him. So the Blackhawks, Kyle Davidson, they do right by the player here in this situation and giving Reichel another opportunity, granting his wish after he requested to be traded and giving him a fresh start with the Vancouver Canucks that he deserves as a 23-year-old, right? And clearly the Canucks, based on the position they put him in, as I'll get into here in just a second, in his debut with the team, they have high hopes for him, and they're going to be giving him an opportunity that the Blackhawks just were not offering here. So yes, it's a disappointing end to Reichel's tenure. It's definitely not a quality return by Kyle Davidson, but he did right by Reichel here, and his agent praised Kyle Davidson for the way that he handled the situation and for getting Reichel to a new team and handling everything with class. And whether you want to acknowledge it or not, that is significant for players to know that regardless of what the situation is going to be, Kyle Davidson, this is an organization that's always going to put the player first and try to do right by them. That is something that holds some weight. So yeah, a disappointing return, a disappointing end to Reichel's tenure, but I think we all kind of saw this coming if you could read between the lines, right? It just wasn't going to happen for Reichel here in Chicago. Maybe it'll happen for him with the Vancouver Canucks organization, although he's not off to the best start with his new team, as in his season debut, he centered the Canucks second line with Brock Besser and Evander Kane playing on his wings, but finished as a -2 in that one with only 1 shot on goal. Also won just 2 of 10 faceoffs. And that's one thing as well. I mean, Reichel, he never really had a consistent position here in Chicago. He was down in the bottom 6 as a center, down in the bottom 6 as a wing, up in the top 6 as a wing. Like, he never really had just one consistent role. And I think he kind of just didn't really know what player he necessarily needed to turn into until it was too late. And even then, a defensive-minded player. I talked about a couple of days ago how I would love for Reichel to take a page out of the Ilya Mikheyev playbook and kind of turn himself into that style of player, but he doesn't have the same size that Mikheyev has. Definitely just doesn't have the overall defensive prowess and the recognition, again, of what's transpiring on the ice in front of him. It's easier said than done, but I just think that's the kind of player that Lukas Reichel has to become, but he never was in like one consistent spot for the Blackhawks throughout these last couple of seasons. Very interested to see how long of a leash he's going to have for the Canucks down the middle. He did fare better last night in the team's 4-3 overtime win over the Edmonton Oilers, actually, I believe it was. Yeah, I do believe it was Edmonton 4-3. Didn't wind up with a point, finished as a -1, but did bounce back to win 8 of 13 faceoffs. We'll see if Reichel, how things go for him with his new team, but I'm wishing him all the best. He was always a kid that, despite his ups and downs and despite the frustrations that he definitely went through, always kept a smile on his face, definitely was, enjoyed by his teammates. There were so many posts on Instagram from numerous Blackhawks youngsters that have grown close to Lukas over the years, who, shared their love and support and gave him well wishes as he's now on to the next step in his journey with the Vancouver Canucks. And I'm wishing all the same here. It just wasn't going to happen in Chicago. Doesn't mean we should, go and get upset if Reichel were to go and figure it out in Vancouver, because we know he just wasn't going to get that same opportunity under Jeff Blashill. So wishing Reichs all the best. Hopefully he can, pick up his first point with the Canucks here in these next couple of games. Seems like they're giving him one heck of an opportunity. Played over 16 minutes last night, and I believe again centered the second line. So wishing all the best for Lukas Reichel, but there's the breakdown on the Blackhawks sending him to Vancouver and why they did it when they just netted a 2027 fourth-round selection in return. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll go over what plagued the team in a sleepy 3-1 loss to LA last night, which snapped their 5-game point streak. But first, I do got to show some love to one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is now nearing the midway point, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for every kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's super quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and more ways than ever to now get in on the action, are you ready to play? All you got to do is go and download the FanDuel app now, or go and check out FanDuel.com to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet and get $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Real quick, just a reminder, if you're enjoying what you're watching or listening to here today, well, specifically watching, go and smash that like button for me and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, please make sure to rate and review the show. Greatly appreciate all of your support as always, Blackhawks fans. Segment 2 on today's episode, though, the Blackhawks sadly had their 5-game point streak snapped on Sunday night at the United Center, falling 3-1 to the Los Angeles Kings in a game that that resembled and had a lot of similarities to the performance they had 2 Fridays ago against the Vancouver Canucks, as they were facing off against a team that was on the back end of a road back-to-back, and they took advantage of that in the opening 20 minutes, only to somehow get outworked in the second and end up losing the game on home ice. That's basically the quick notes, spark notes version of last night's game. Connor Bedard got the Blackhawks off to a promising start as he deflected a shot from Ilya Mikheyev for his 3rd goal of the season. Also got a little bit of help from former Blackhawks netminder Anton Forsberg, who was in between the pipes for the Kings, as Bedard's deflection rang off the post, but then Forsberg, not necessarily sure where the puck was, kicked it into his own net. And one of the odd similarities also to that game against Vancouver is, if you remember, Kevin Lankinen was fighting the puck early on, and he was not playing it well, just looked very uncomfortable in his return, not his first return, but back at the UC. Anton Forsberg, it was kind of the same thing for him last night. He had went out to play the puck out of the crease and just absolutely launched it over the glass. Didn't seem like he was very settled in during the opening 20 minutes of this game. only to go and completely shut down the Blackhawks the remainder of the contest. This goal from Bedard ended up being all the offense that the Blackhawks could muster up. Mikheyev, by the way, did want to be sure to mention that he was bumped up to the Hawks' top line for this game, as Tyler Bertuzzi was unfortunately out for the first time this season due to an injury. I'll touch more on the latest updates that we have on Bertuzzi here during segment 3 in just a moment. But Mikheyev, I thought he was excellent along with Connor Bedard, and might have been the most impactful player for the Blackhawks in this one with that primary assist. Also, did some, per usual, excellent work on the penalty kill. And then he also drew a penalty early on in the third period, but that unfortunately put an end to his night as Mikheyev went crashing hard into the boards after being tripped up by Kings forward Adrian Kempe, and he wasn't able to return for the remainder of the contest. I'll have an update on Mikheyev's status here in just a moment as well. But in that first period, the Blackhawks, they were controlling the play. They definitely had their opportunities to build on their lead against a sluggish team that didn't really look ready to go right from the opening puck drop. Again, a lot of similarities to that game against the Vancouver Canucks, as the Blackhawks failed to convert on those two-man advantages and failed to really get anything going. That kind of, I think, woke Los Angeles up a little bit going into that first intermission, because they looked like a whole different team coming out of that intermission right from the opening faceoff in the second. And the Blackhawks looked like a different team as well, as they were on their heels for a majority of that second period. And a couple of rush chances that they allowed in the opening 4 to 5 minutes ended up being the difference in the final outcome. Sam Rinzel with a bad turnover in the defensive zone up high near the Kings blue line. That leads to a 2-on-1 rush going in the other direction. And Alex Laferriere, who I swear always performs well against the Blackhawks as well, almost in like a similar fashion to Oliver Bjorkstrand. When you go and look at the lineup, maybe he's not the guy that absolutely jumps out to you, but for whatever reason seems to have the Blackhawks number. He found the back of the net early on in the second period to tie the game up 1-1. Kaiser also took a penalty in the opening 30 seconds of the middle frame. This Kings goal, the goal from Laferriere wasn't on the power play, but again, just goes to show how sloppy the Blackhawks were in the opening 5 to 6 minutes. And then Jason Dickinson and his return to the lineup also made kind of a foolish pass when the Hawks were in the O-zone that led to an odd man or a partial breakaway chance going the other way for Kevin Fiala. I thought Murphy and Kaiser did a really good job to track down a speedy Fiala in transition to break up his partial breakaway attempt. But unfortunately, he was able to wrap the puck around and tuck it home before Soderblom got to the far post to give the Kings a 2-1 lead. That ended up being the game winner on the night, but the second period was not good enough from the Blackhawks, and it was pretty unacceptable the way that they played against a team who not only was on the back end of a road back-to-back, but was in their third game in their last 4 days, clearly were tired in the first period, but for whatever reason just were able to generate the momentum against a Blackhawks team that should have had an advantage after only playing once in the previous 6 days, I believe it was. So like they should have definitely been the more energized team, and the way they got outworked was completely unacceptable. The numbers for both squads at 5-on-5 in that second period. The Hawks only registered 3 shots on goal total in the middle frame, while the Kings led 10-3 in scoring chances and 4-1 in high danger chances at even strength. And that put the Blackhawks, put their backs up against the wall in the third period, because the Kings defensively, when they have the lead, are one of the best teams in the entire league. They played their classic shutdown, boring hockey, as Connor Bedard called it after the game, not saying it was a dig like he mentioned, but that's just kind of the way that they handle things when they have the lead late in contests. They basically thwarted away every dump in or every rush opportunity the Blackhawks generated. Felt like Anton Forsberg, after he struggled to play the puck in the first period, was moving it really well to allow his defenders to get clears out to center ice and just kind of have the Blackhawks restart the same process over and over and over again. They really weren't able to get any sustained offensive zone time there in that third period. They did get a real good opportunity with just over 3 minutes to play as they went to the man advantage for the 5th time on the evening, but as it was for the entire night. Very lackluster was the Blackhawks power play. Didn't really do much up until Joel Armia ended up putting home the empty netter. They had a couple of chances in like the final 30 to 40 seconds as people were already on their way out of the United Center. Anton Forsberg stopped them all to secure a 3-1 win for the Los Angeles Kings. Tough way for the Blackhawks to put an end to their point streak, as it might have been, their sloppiest performance of the season so far. I think the second period might have been their worst period, and in my opinion was their first kind of stinker performance in their opening 9 contests. First regulation loss since the home opener 15 days ago against the Montreal Canadiens, and also was the first time this year in which the Blackhawks weren't tied or had the lead going into the third period. We'll see if they'll be able to bounce back tomorrow night when they're back in action on home ice for the final time in 15 days. Won't play another home game, I think, until November 12th or something along those lines. They're going on a big West Coast road trip, so we'll see if they can bounce back when they return to the United Center tomorrow against the Ottawa Senators. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, want to get into some quick injury updates and the changes that Blashill made on the power play when it was very putrid on Sunday against the Kings. But first, I got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors, which is Game Time. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Nothing is easy about getting tickets with other websites. They can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. But that's where the Game Time app comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. So go and take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. All you got to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and then use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off. Segment 3, after a lousy showing at the UC last night, not a real surprise that Jeff Blashill wanted his boys on the ice for practice at Fifth Third Arena this morning. But 2 players who didn't participate in the practice session were Tyler Bertuzzi, who, as I mentioned, missed the game on Sunday against Los Angeles, as well as Ilya Mikheyev, who unfortunately had to exit the game early after yet another promising performance. Both players, Blashill confirmed, are dealing with upper body injuries at this point in time and have their statuses in question for tomorrow's matchup with the Sens. For Bertuzzi, Blashill said he couldn't say one way or the other whether he knew if Bertuzzi was going to play tomorrow. He said he'll know more before the morning skate, but he did mention the word doubtful just because he didn't practice also on Saturday, obviously then missed the game the following day, now hasn't participated in each of the last 2 practice sessions. That's why Blashill sees him as doubtful to return to the lineup tomorrow. So looks like the Blackhawks sadly are going to be out without Tyler Bertuzzi once again, which I think his presence was missed in that game last night, even though he's not a speedy forward. And I don't know if he would have been able to race down any of those dump-in attempts that the Blackhawks had in the third period. He is someone who can go and win those board battles and get loose pucks back to the skill players like Connor Bedard and Andrei Burakovsky. And the Blackhawks just really could not go and get the puck back when they were dumping it in. That's not a strength of their team, as they are undersized, particularly down the middle with Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar. And the Kings did a really good job of just clogging up the neutral zone in the blue line and making them dump it in. And as I mentioned, Anton Forsberg did a really good job of playing the puck to kind of steer it out of harm's way. But yeah, Bertuzzi on the power play too. I thought he was missed. Power play was atrocious last night. So tough to hear that it looks like he's going to be out of the lineup for a second consecutive game. For Mikheyev, Blashill didn't really have much of an update on his status other than it is a day-to-day upper body issue, which is definitely positive news because Mikheyev has just been so sensational for the Blackhawks, particularly on the penalty kill. He's also chipped in for 3 goals this season. He just truly is a jack of all trades type of guy that I'm sure with the mentality that Jeff Blashill has, absolutely loves what he gets on a nightly basis out of number 95. So a long-term loss from him would have been absolutely devastating for this forward group in many different ways. Glad to hear that that isn't the case, although we're not sure if Mikheyev is going to be in the lineup tomorrow night. Could be in jeopardy of missing his first game here of the season. And with both of those two guys not participating in practice here today, that meant that Blashill had to kind of change things up with his lines once again during line rushes. And it was Ryan Green who was up on the top line along with Bedard and Burakovsky. And I feel for Bedard, not only because while Burakovsky, I do think has been better than I expected him to be in his opening 8 games with the team, I still feel like the Blackhawks failed in getting Bedard a true top liner here in his 3rd NHL season, and he's already had to deal with a handful of different combinations, which has been a problem for him in his first 2 seasons. Not having a consistent line mate, Ryan Donato, who has been playing excellent hockey here to open up the season. He obviously had good chemistry with Bedard last year. They really haven't had an opportunity to play much with each other at 5-on-5, so that's a little bit frustrating. Ryan Green, though, not a true top 6 type of guy, but interested to see how he's going to fare with Connor Bedard. I do think ultimately, Green is capable enough to be put in that position with the Blackhawks backs against the wall if need be. And I would also understand not wanting to switch up the Nazar, Teravainen, and Donato trio. Also Slaggert, Doc, and Dickinson were very effective in the opening portion of that game on Sunday, so I understand them sticking together here for today's practice. But yeah, obviously not ideal to be having Ryan Green, who's normally a 3rd or 4th line center, up on the top line along with Connor Bedard. We'll see tomorrow morning if either Bertuzzi or Mikheyev are able to return. And then Sam Lafferty, he stepped into a 4th line spot along with Nick Foligno during practice here today. If either of Mikheyev or Bertuzzi are able to play, he very well could be healthy scratch for a 7th consecutive game here. But if they're both out, that means he's going to be back in the lineup because the Hawks only have 11 healthy forwards on their roster. And one thing that I thought was interesting, Blashill was asked during practice today whether he's going to start going with 12 forwards more in the lineup just because Jason Dickinson has had to exit 2 games early this season because of injury. Obviously, Mikheyev missed most of the 3rd period in last night's contest. 3 of the opening 9 games, the Hawks have been down to only 10 forwards on their bench in the latter stages, and all 3 of those games have resulted in losses. However, doesn't sound like Blashill is going to divert from that strategy moving forward because he just thinks it really makes sense to have 7 defensemen in the lineup with this young group on a regular basis. So it doesn't look like that mentality or in that structure for the Hawks lineup is going to be changing anytime soon, despite some of those issues late in the game. Last but certainly not least, before I wrap up today's episode, wanted to point out a couple of changes that Blashill made on the top power play unit, with Andre Burakovsky stepping up there and replacing Teuvo Teravainen, which I do think is a move that makes sense considering Burakovsky's size and speed combo. He also plays a very straightforward game, which I think the Blackhawks kind of get away from on the man advantage, but his size and speed combo, I definitely think will aid in the entry struggles that the Blackhawks have been going through early on this season. And if they have to dump it in, Burakovsky is capable of going and chasing it down and winning a battle because of that size and speed. So I do like replacing him with Teuvo Teravainen on that top unit. Teuvo down on the second unit now with Colton Dock, Ryan Donato, Ryan Green, and Artem Levshinov as the second power play unit. The other change that Blashill made to the top power play unit I liked as well. He moved Connor Bedard from his usual spot at the left circle over to the right circle and put Andre Burakovsky over on that left dot. And Burakovsky, by the way, 2 of his 4 points on the season have come on the man advantage, both over on the left side, scored a goal against the Utah Mammoth from the left side, also had a nice primary assist to set up Ryan Donato against the Ducks from the left side. So that seems to be a comfort spot for him, at least early on this year. And then with moving Bedard to the right-hand side, that allows him as the team's best playmaker and just has the best creativity with the puck out of anyone on the squad. That allows him to try and set up one-timer opportunities for Frankie Nazar in the bumper role. And I don't think Nazar has been a dangerous enough weapon in that bumper roll right out in the slot. Yes, Bertuzzi did feed him for a nice goal against Tampa Bay on Thursday, but I still feel like that hasn't been weaponized enough on the Blackhawks man advantage, and putting your best offensive player over on the right dot to give him that opportunity to try to set up Nazar for those one-timers, which of course wasn't previously possible with both players being a righty and Bedard over on the left-hand side. I do think that makes a lot of sense as well. So hopefully those changes will kind of provide a spark for the Blackhawks top power play unit, because they definitely played, their lack of success definitely played a big part in the Hawks falling short and having their 5-game point streak snapped last night against Los Angeles. They had quality chances to go, in the first period up by a couple of goals when they were the ones controlling play. They had that opportunity late in the third period to go in, tie it up, and get the momentum back on their side. But they came up short and didn't really get much going on any of those 5 opportunities on the evening. So we'll see if they're able to bounce back on the man advantage tomorrow against the Senators as well. That's going to wrap up today's beefy episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they're uploaded. Thank you all for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Also, go and check out the new Locked On NHL Game Night for your second listen of the day. Every game, every night, up until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Check out Locked On NHL. Check out NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL, available on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Until the next show, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.